Hello networkers and welcome to another ANE off topic. I was going to release this week part 2 for episode 108 for Ask the Network Engineer, where I will conclude my conversation about exam dumps and cheating among network engineers. But I figured let's pause that and I will release that next week. And I want to talk about what is going on right now. But not in the way what you would probably expect for most other videos that are telling you about COVID-19, the coronavirus. I'm not going to tell you about, washing your hands and social distancing, and not really about the panic that people are seeing right now or experiencing. Not going to talk too much about the shutdown because everything is being shut down, everything's being canceled. It's like a ghost town. I went to the gym yesterday and we went to the store afterwards, and I typically don't go out a lot. I do a lot of work remotely anyway. So for me, that's the norm. But when I do go to the store, and we went to the store yesterday, I already saw for my own eyes like the shelves just empty. With bread, there was no bread, there's no frozen foods for a lot of the different aisles. Toilet paper, paper towels, water. It was like everyone is really panicking. People are scared. And one of the things that always scares me the most, that scares me shitless actually, is what if this virus had a very high mortality rate, 25%, 50% and higher? Wow. It's very uneasy times right now. And as a result, as precautions of help to prevent the spread, of course, things are shutting down. They're canceling large events. As you all know, I'm a runner. That's one of my things that I do. And pretty much all race events are canceled for the spring and going into almost little early summer, I guess. So that has been a bummer, but people understand why. But it's kind of a mixed feelings about that, right? It's like we're putting our lives on hold until this thing is kind of worked out or figured out. So you have a lot of events that are being canceled. There are sports that are being canceled. Like the NBA suspended their season as of right now. That's something very unusual. And other similar things like that. You get the idea. This video really isn't about going through all the statistics and what's going on with the COVID-19. You already know what's going on about that. And this video is a little bit different because this is something that I have seen as a network engineer of how people are truly not prepared for one particular aspect, and that is with disaster recovery. Okay, so as I said before, a lot of things are shutting down, including businesses. Companies are shutting down. They're having their employees work remotely. Okay, it makes sense. In this day of age, that's possible, depending on the job that you have. So I'm like I said, I'm a consultant. I work remotely all the time anyway. So this really isn't new for me. But for companies, when they actually have their workers work remotely, and if there is an epidemic, a panic, a disaster that's happening, I have noticed that many of my customers, in fairness, all of my customers, and even a lot of my colleagues, my friends in other organizations, everyone is panicking, everyone is shuffling things around because they don't know what to do in terms of a disaster. So here are some examples of that. And actually a lot of you guys have been alluding that with your own experience because with what's going on, there is very similar reaction. So one of these particular things is with VPN users, because if we're talking about remote users, then we're talking about remote access solution that has to be implemented on your firewalls or a dedicated firewall that's handling VPN user connectivity. Well, when most of us design a firewall and we talk about VPN users, we always talk about, okay, what is the concurrent number of VPN users that we expect? So we can get the appropriate licensing to install that on our firewalls and of course get the appropriate firewalls, which is of course based on the bandwidth connection that we have, the internet feed as we plugging into the firewall. So for example, you may say, okay, so we're expecting 20 concurrent VPN users. So okay, we may get a license for maybe 30 or 40 people, who knows, right? Well, with these shutdowns and having people work remotely, that's breaking everything. Because now you don't have 20, 30, or 40 people, VPN users currently connected. You may have 100, 250 plus users. And guess what? They can't connect. So now you're scrambling to get licensing on your firewall, hoping that your firewall can support that license account. Furthermore, hoping that your firewall can support that traffic load of terminating 250 plus VPN connections. So there's a lot of ramblings where a lot of customer firewalls just can't do that. And this is with medium and large size networks, by the way, right? Where they're like, what do we do? So then they start figuring out, well, what do you typically do in the first place? You know, like what is your job? So maybe you don't require to do VPN services. What can you do that is offline? Things like that. This is what that shuffling is about because companies don't really typically prepare for a disaster recovery scenario. Now, I worked in an environment specifically with disaster recovery, okay? A big part of my experience is I have a lot of great experience with that. Because I worked for a financial institution, a bank. And part of their SOX compliancy and other compliancy that they had is to make sure that we had a disaster recovery plan. Man, it is something that we had to do vigorously every single year. Plus, we did testing. We did a DR test. And I mean, a DR test where, now keep in mind, this disaster recovery plan that we had involved a team. So there's a team. So in this team is members of each particular part of the company, all right? So there's people that took care of the desktops, the servers, database, security, project management, and other different management departments. And of course me, I was the person responsible for DR recovery for the networking side of things, okay? And what this involved was, what if there was an earthquake, okay? We live in California, so we have pretty big earthquakes out here that has happened in the past. What if there's a hurricane? What if there's a tornado? What if there is a global massive power outage that we're down for several days, weeks, or months, okay? These are things that come up in our disaster recovery planning. And part of that is that we do a DR test, which means that one day every year, we go to an offsite location and we basically do our job to quickly bring up some kind of an infrastructure. So for my responsibility is to network. So I'll make sure that I have a network that is up and running. And then the server people would do their thing, desktop people would do their thing. And we're doing all this to see how fast we can do it. Now my responsibility for the DR was really simple, is getting some kind of a router infrastructure that's connecting to a temporary WAN. Actually, no, it wasn't WAN. That was used for replication. We were actually utilizing ISDN, so that's some old stuff there. But the point is, with ISDN, it can actually dial into. So we had our remote sites all with backup ISDN BRIs, and then those could trigger a call to the DR site, okay, to then access only critical network services. That was the key thing. So you can't surf the internet. This is only critical business services and applications that could be used. So that was pretty much what we called our temporary disaster recovery that we had. And we did our testing for this every single year. And eventually that would eventually evolve to us deploying. And by the way, so what we did there for going off location and doing all of that, that's what we call a cold site. Now a cold site is where equipment is all powered off. It's not an active site. It's not a live site. So a cold site means that we're going on site, we're turning on equipment, all of it is being turned on and doing some configuration, and now is active so then people can start utilizing that if there's an emergency that actually happens. Well, we eventually merged that, so then now we had a hot site. And a hot site is simply just another secondary data center, and that's what we had. So I was responsible for designing and building that entire backup data center network, which isn't a big deal. Don't think like, oh my goodness, that's just another, think about this, it's a backup data center. So we just had a single collapse core, servers were connected, critical servers were connected into it. We had a SAN that was connected into it. We had a dedicated WAN connection that was going between the primary and secondary data center that was for really data replication with the SAN that we had. So we can replicate data and the primary data center and the secondary data center. So that was really a big part of what we did. We were prepared for any kind of a disaster. So that's why when COVID-19 happened, this was nothing more but invoking our disaster recovery plan, or that particular company did that, since I'm no longer at that company now, all right? So now bringing this full circle, companies don't do that. Companies don't have a disaster recovery plan. They never sat down and thought about that, like, what if? What if we're down? What if we have remote users? And that's the key thing. That is another tool that's another approach, another tool for your toolkit, is that you need to establish some kind of a business continuity plan. And that's more for the business overall. But for you as a network engineer, you got to say, wait a second. Okay, so sure, we have our firewalls, our routers, or switches to accommodate normal business use and activity. Okay, got it. But what if? What if there is an earthquake, there is a hurricane, there's a tornado, there's a power outage, there is a virus outbreak? What do we do? What is our response for that? How are we prepared for that? And having those plans in order, in place. Now, this doesn't really mean technology or infrastructure. This could simply just mean policy, okay? But these are the kind of questions that you would ask. If there is an epidemic outbreak that no one can be in the office, then how will we continue to do business? What is required for our infrastructure? What kind of redundancy is required if needed? These are things that has to be done now. Because if not, you would get panic and shuffling of trying to figure out how to get things to work. So keep those factors in mind, because it's really important, because this is proof that things can be not normal and become a panic very quickly. So thank you for watching this video. Please like, share, and subscribe. Be safe, wash hands, social distancing, and until next time, keep networking. And next week will be part 2, the conclusion to episode 108. Thanks for watching.